Hey everyone, this is your primer on how to write an introduction for a history essay. First of all, remember the funnel. This is what your English teacher has told you and will continue to tell you as well. The introduction is the first paragraph in the essay, and in it you will start with about 3 to 4 sentences of an introduction, and then you will funnel into the thesis. So the idea here is that you start with something broader that connects to the essay prompt, and then you narrow it down until you get to the very specific argument that your essay will be making. The introduction appears on the AP writing rubrics in the form of the contextualization point. The language from the College Board says that the introduction or the contextualization situates the argument by explaining the broader historical events, developments, or processes immediately relevant to the question. So in your introduction, what you are doing is providing context or historical context to help make your thesis make more sense. So you want to consider the events, developments, and processes that lead into your thesis statement. Now, we're going to take a look at what that actually looks like more specifically. So what are the steps that you should follow to write a good introduction? Here they are. First of all, you want to start your paragraph with a date and event. So what you're doing here is you're setting the time period that the essay is about. The date can be something very specific, like say 1914, World War I started, or it could be more broad, say the mid-14th century or the mid-1500s, and then you still want to name whatever event that you are talking about. So the Renaissance of the 14th to 16th centuries, for example. That should go in the first sentence. It anchors your reader in time. Then as you write the next couple of sentences, what you're doing is providing specifics about the time period that are relevant to the question. So you really need to look at the question itself and decide what it is about that time period that will lead into your argument. You might consider a couple of acronyms to give you some ideas about what to write here. So one acronym is PERSIA, which stands for Political, Economic, Religious, Social, Intellectual, and Artistic History, or SPRITE, which is very similar. SPRITE stands for Social, Political, Religious, Intellectual, Technological, and Economic. So either of those two acronyms can give you a route to thinking about what specifics are relevant here. Maybe it's economic history that's relevant, or maybe it's political history, or maybe social developments, and to make that decision you need to go back to the essay question itself. Finally, your last sentence or your introduction before the thesis should transition into it so that there is a natural flow from the broader time period that you set right down into your argument. All of this is going to be about 3 to 4 sentences. Could be more if you like, but you can do a great job in just 3 to 4 sentences here. So let's take a look at 3 different examples. The first example that I have here is not a historical essay. It's just why is St. Francis better than Bellarmine? So take a moment, pause, and read the introduction here. All right, now that you've read it, you can see that this particular introduction does not provide a time period because the question itself is not a historical one. It does not require a sense of time, but it does provide specific information relevant to the prompt that helps to set up who are these two schools, why would we bother to compare them and argue that St. Francis is better than Bellarmine, and then we lead in or transition into the thesis with a transitional word, however, and the rest of that sentence, and then we go right into the thesis at the end, which is in blue and underlined. All right, our second example is a historical one, analyze the consequences of the Black Death. So pause here and read the introduction. All right, let's take a look at this introduction. The first sentence starts with that time period in the mid-14th century, and it establishes the event in question. This question is about the Black Death, so we talk about the plague, and we also locate it in place. It arrived in Europe. The next couple of sentences there, the next 2 to 3 sentences, then provide more relevant specifics that help us to understand what the plague was, how did it arrive in Europe, and what was it called. And the last sentence of the introduction, one that says, and yet the impact of the Black Death, etc., was not entirely dreadful, is our transition into the thesis statement, which argues that the Black Death was dreadful, but also had favorable consequences. And here's our last example. Compare and contrast the ideas of Machiavelli and Mirandola on the nature of man. Pause the video and take a moment to read this introduction. Okay, let's take a look. The first sentence sets a time period. In this case, we've got the 14th to 16th centuries, and it also identifies the event in question, the time period in question, which was the Italian Renaissance. The next couple of sentences describe an aspect of the Renaissance that is relevant to the question. That the question asks us about two authors of the time period, so we need to focus in on the literary element of the Renaissance. We don't want to necessarily diverge here into all the history of the art of the time period, but we're going straight into literature. And we want to establish what texts these two individuals wrote. Those are great specifics and help us to lead into the argument, which is about the ideas that Machiavelli and Mirandola express in the two literary works that we are analyzing. So hopefully that helps you write an introduction, and I wish you good luck as you venture into this fun task.